Thanks for checking out this highlight from the Casually Hardcore podcast. If you want to check out the full podcast after the show, please be sure to hit the top link in the description. But now, let's do it. All right, let's go ahead and move into our second topic in this case, getting into the light spoilers. Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. How do you feel about it now that the story is, well put, complete in quotations?
The story of Shadowbringers is not complete. What are you talking about? Or are you suggesting that how do we feel about the idea that it's going to be wrapped up in 6.0?
Well, I would leave the question to Chris.
So, so in theory, the story of the first was designed to be told over 5.0 through 5.3, right?
Okay.
So 5.3, you know, at this point we're starting to see Lit come to a close. We've seen Eden come to a close. Like we've seen these things get to a point where they're as closed as we closed Stormblood. They're as closed as we closed Heavensward. There are open-ended notes. Stormblood in particular, I know a lot of people like. I'm not a big Stormblood guy, but people are like.
I'm actually enjoying Stormblood more now that we have Bozja. Like I felt like there was something missing. I felt like it was building, and then it's like, oh, by the way, we're gonna go Dimension Hop for a minute, and then it's like, okay, now we're gonna put this little cap on, Stormblood.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I wrote these topics. So these topics. So in my mind, this topic is how do you feel as we come to 5.5? We don't know what 5.5 and 5.55 holds, but at this point, like, how do you feel comparing this as like a complete expansion package to now that we know we're not getting another Ultimate to Stormblood, Heavensward, ARR, right? Those are story packages, and yes, the narrative goes on, but like, how are you feeling as far as like Shadowbringers? At this point, if a new player comes in and they're like, oh, we're all talking about Endwalker now. So in some ways, our mind has already kind of brought Shadowbringers to a close, even though we still have 2 more substantial patch cycles.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. So I think this was more true of Heavensward than any of the other expansions, right? Is that we've got this kind of grand narrative arc with Hydaelyn and Zodiac and the war with Garlemald and all that. And while particularly the Hydaelyn Zodiac thing, like Heavensward kind of built a lot into that, particularly in the post Heavensward patches. The story of like the Dragon Song War itself was relatively self-contained, and it's just like, okay, well then, you get the Scholasticate and you get the Ishgard restoration and a couple of side stories and stuff that sort of brings us back to Ishgard. But for the most part, we kind of like tied a bow on that, right? And I think Shadowbringers is going to be kind of similar with Novrat, right? Is that like, job's done there. Like we've restored the darkness through the course of Eden. We like uncovered the truth of the flood of light, and we dealt with Eden. We have kind of done most of the work of restoring the empty, and now it's just kind of like sit back and let that happen. I was over here expecting that the 8-man raid and the 24-man raid may bring us back to Novrad, because it would be weird that we just kind of like totally leave that behind. We still got like Gaia and Reen and like a whole bunch of characters that we're invested in there, right? And hearing that like the 8-man Pandemonium is like almost certainly not going to be on the first,
right? And
the 24-man is specifically going to be in or at least about Eorzea. That's certainly not going to be on the first. It's like it's like we really are just kind of like leaving a huge part of Shadowbringers behind us. We keep joking like Shadowbringers might be over, but Stormblood's never over, right? We're coming into like Stormblood 2. We're sort of returning to Stormblood. I suspect and I hope that the exploration content for Endwalker is going to be about like going into the parts of the empty that are sort of being restored. Like with Bozja, we've got this prerequisite of Ivalice, right?
Yeah.
And it's setting this precedent for having like, raid content, gating exploration content. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do the same thing for exploration content in Endwalker. And I would find that kind of really compelling is, like you were just saying, Brian, how great it feels to be kind of doing Bozja and feeling like that has built so much on Stormblood, right?
Yes.
Well, I think and I hope we'll see the same thing where the exploration content we get in Endwalker will kind of feel like it's continuing the narrative of Shadowbringers and all the questions that we've got left and the time that we want to spend, further with these characters.
Absolutely.
So that's my hope.
So I have a question, because this is it's crazy speculation theory, but with 6.0 actually ending the story of the expansion, but also just this first epic, right? Like if you think of it, this was an epic from, I'd say from 1.0 to 6.0, that's an epic.
Totally.
We'll probably do another epic, or they haven't kind of, some interviews kind of tease that they might actually be shorter stories that are kind of more self-contained. Who knows that they decide to then build up upon them with a kind of another thread. But what if we see, like, as a part of this, a rejoining in which Norvrant and like other kind of these elements get pushed back into the main world, so that Norvrant and all the characters that we've had this experience with, we get to then be they're a part of this whole new world that happens at the probably what I would say the conclusion of Endwalker.
Well, narratively speaking, having a rejoining would like undermine Shadowbringers, because what Shadowbringers is all about is preventing a rejoining between the first and the source. Because what happens if there is a rejoining is that everyone dies on the first.
Right.
Unless we come up with some new like Deus Ex Machina, unless we find out like how, say, Emmett Salk and Laha Brea survived the Sundering, and do that to just like everyone that we care about in Norvrant, then they would not survive that process. I've been seeing like a lot of people when they're speculating about Endwalker, they're like, all right, what if we see more rejoinings? What if we see like the Warrior of Light sort of take on the role of an Ascian? What if we see them take on like the memories and the identity of Azem, right? And while these are all like interesting and compelling theories, from a narrative perspective, so many of these, like most of these that I've been hearing, really do just like undermine and like belittle the whole fulcrum of Shadowbringers and of like this 10-year narrative arc, right?
Well, yeah, if people die, in that regards, like if there's because essentially the theory that I've always kind of, or the question I've always pondered about the Ascians is that when they messed up the 13th, like I was like, they obviously clearly felt like there was still a pathway forward, and that pathway was that they didn't have to get all the different, planets, all the different, shards in this case. And so then the question is that like, they kind of had this, they ended up getting so focused on this. And sometimes that kind of lasered vision kind of clouds like your peripheral vision to find out like, oh, it turns out there's a switch over here. Flip the switch. Oh, nobody's got to die. It's like it seems that, like I'm always wondering, and not that it would be so simple and foolish as just like, oh, here's the everybody lives switch. We'd flip that on.
Yeah, it took us a whole expansion to get like 4 people back to the source. So like saving a whole shard seems expensive.
Even if no one dies, like the whole point of Eden was like, hey, we've saved this world, now let's restore it so people can like reclaim it. Like it's their world. I wouldn't like ask you guys to be like, hey, I'm gonna destroy Earth and we can just all go like chill on Mars. There's a bunch of other people already there. It's gonna be cool. Like we'll all get to hang out together.
Trust me, yeah.
No, I don't think so. I really don't think so.
It'll be interesting to see ultimately. I just wonder, because are we like that whole narrative thread, that whole world, those characters, like if there's nothing that drives us back to the first, like it's just that almost kind of what was it, the WoW expansion where the people say you can just skip because it was like an alternate reality.
Yeah. WoD did some weird stuff with like the timeline or whatever. Because when I'm now that I'm interested in 14 lore, I was trying to go figure out WoW lore because I've been a WoW player since vanilla, and
right, of course,
I have such a loose understanding of the story. Like they do a lot more like voice acting in raids, so like I have a little more grasp because like it's literally getting shoved into your brain. But just imagine like Ethis talking over the raid as you did it. Like his voice is just being broadcast over the PA system. So like you pick up some things by osmosis, but like you don't intend to. And so I have a lot of gaps. And they were, and so I was like, so do I start what expansion do I start with? And they're like, well, whatever you do, just you don't need to do. And it's like, oh, there's like whole sections that don't matter because they do weird stuff with like time and all that. I think when we talk about Ascians, that's why I wanted there to be a beast tribe in the Tempest. Like, I understand that wasn't necessarily like a real thing, but I feel like there's probably enough knowledge in Emmett's head that was not in ours, that it's like, I could have benefited from 2 weeks worth of daily quests, enlightening a little bit on like how creation magic works. What is it bound by? What is it not? Like, I think there was a lot there in like the conflict that they were struggling with. I don't think it was so much like, okay, they had an 80% voter turnout in the primal voting, and 50% were for Team Zodiark, and 50% for Team Hydaelyn, and 20% were abstaining and saying, I'm just not voting in this. My vote doesn't count. Like, I don't think that was what was going on. I think there was a lot of conflicted, deep feelings about like, how did we get to the point that Zodiark was the best option? And then how did we realize that there was enough wrong with that Hydaelyn was the best option? And what about the people who felt like there was another path? And like, that whole zone was like, hey, these are all questions. And it's like, cool, are there going to be answers? No. So like, we still have 5-5 and 5-5-5, but like, I just assume that Shadowbringers is going to leave me with questions.
Endwalker's going to be answering most of those questions.
Yeah.
And a lot of those questions are going to be on the move, apparently.
I hope that you really enjoyed that highlight, and I hope that you check out the full podcast. Again, link is in the description. Thanks for being here, and hope you have a fantastic day, you wonderful, beautiful individual.